Hello and welcome to We'll Tell You What We're Reading, the monthly show where we, library staff, tell you, our viewers, what we're reading right now. I'm Liz Rior, and I'm the collection development librarian here at the Waltham Public Library. And joining me, as usual, are my two wonderful colleagues, Greg Carter and Louise Goldstein. As always, we have lots of great virtual and in-person programming going on at the library, a lot of which is featured on the library's YouTube channel. So please hit like and subscribe, ring the little bell, just click all the buttons that let you know what we're doing, because we're here for you, and we want you to, get your money's worth. We do a lot of great interactive programs on Zoom for all ages, including one of our regular book clubs still, but we have a few other things. So you can check out those, and I'm going to list them now. So coming up on Saturday, July 9th, we have the Saturday Morning Book Club, which will be in person. They're reading The Sweetness of Water by Nathan Harris. On Monday, June 11th, this is a virtual program. The Zoom link is on our website. We have Tell Us What You're Reading, which is where you, our viewers, get to talk about what you're reading and make recommendations to staff and other viewers. Again, that's on Zoom. On Monday, July 18th, we have the Science Fiction and Fantasy Book Club, which Greg coordinates, and they'll be reading ROBOPOCALYPSE by Daniel Wilson. Again, that's going to be in person at the library. And then on Wednesday, July 20th at 7 o'clock, we have the Wednesday Night Book Club in person, and they'll be reading Something Wild by Hannah Halperin. So for all Waltham Public Library programs, please visit our website for more information, to get Zoom links, etc. We also have lots of great programming for children that I can't get into because there's so much happening this summer. Definitely check it out if you have children involved in your life. As always, please support the Friends of the Waltham Public Library. They are amazing. They pay for some of our programming and for the Zoom accounts that we use. We are so in debt to the Friends because they really do take excellent care of us. So please consider joining the Friends, volunteering with the Friends. You can find more information about that on our website. So now that I've said all of that, let's hear about what folks are reading. That was really dorky of me. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Greg, and let's take it away.
Thank you so much, Liz. This is a busy time of year for me, so I was only able to read two. One I liked, one, well, we'll get into detail about that. But let me get this show on the road. And boom, here we go. So the first book I am going to talk a little bit about is actually the book that I'm reading for my book group. I get to advertise a little, so yay, it counts. I read it. And it is ROBOPOCALYPSE by Daniel H. Wilson. Just to give like a premise of what this is about, it's kind of set about 5 to 10 years into the future. Humanity has, it looks like pretty much our world, except that we're a little bit more advanced when it comes to robotics, understandably. Self-driving cars, drones are obviously a big thing, military or otherwise, but this thing, what essentially happens is that it's that this robot is looking at the world and sees everything in its beautiful intrinsic glory, and then it looks out into space, into the void, and recognizes that there's not a lot out there, so life is pretty precious, which you would think would be a great thing, except that it realizes, oh, humans are kind of messing things up. This world is kind of in deep trouble. There's only one thing to do about that. And, you know, if any of you have read, watched Terminator or The Matrix, you kind of know where this is going. So it's kind of about it's written as in the same way as like a journal, as you're looking over different events of like a robot war between humans and people, how humans adapted to it, how robots adapted to that, and vice versa. If you've ever read World War Z by Max Brooks, this is a very similar thing, except if you replaced zombies with robots, which honestly I think is a little bit more terrifying because robots can run fast and I can't. But it's interesting. I think there's a lot of, I'm going to share, I'll tell more of my opinion, obviously, in the book group In-Depth Experience, but I liked it. I thought it was an entertaining read, and I recommend anybody who just wants like a good, man versus machine book. Yeah, that's what I got for that one. All right. So my following book, I need to explain something about this one. So yeah, I know. So here's the thing: the world can be a rough place sometimes, especially given current events sometimes, and it's frustrating. And even someone like me, a horror aficionado, needs to take a break every once in a while. So I was like, well, what can I do? I need something lighthearted. I need something that's dumb, and I need something that's kind of associated with the things I like say monsters, but nothing too like vicious. So I'm like, what book can I read? And somebody suggested this title, Hocus Pocus and the all-new sequel. Yeah. So fun fact about it, for those of you who don't know, Hocus Pocus is a 90s movie, and all of its campy, horrific glory, starring Bette Midler, and Sarah Jessica Parker, and Catherine Namji, I believe. If I'm saying her name wrong, I'm really sorry about that. But suffice to say, it's about these witches in Salem who are actual witches, and they like eating children, and they're found out, tried, and executed for it. But they make a promise that 300 years later they're going to come back, and they come back in 1993 and try to suck out all the lives of the children of Salem until they're stopped by a bunch of quirky and scrappy children. So for a while, a lot of people have been wanting a sequel, including the actresses, because they loved making this movie so much, but nothing really happened until eventually in 2018, an author by the name of A.W. Jantha, I believe, with the blessing of Disney, this is endorsed by Disney, created a sequel. And it takes place pretty much 2018 and focuses on this girl by the name of Poppy, who is the child of the people who managed to stop the witches like the first time, and has to come and deal with the fact that the witches are now back. If that sounds like it's a lot, it really is. This book is kind of okay. So this book is divided into like 3 stories. One takes place in like Salem, late 17th century during the witch trials and all of that, and pretty much deals with the witches themselves and the after effects of their trial. The second part of the book focuses on the 90s and is pretty much a retelling of like the first Hocus Pocus movie. And then the final part is focusing on like the here and now with dealing with the kids and stuff. And I think some people will like this. I think some diehard fans are, but it's just, it's a little bit too much jumpy around for me. And I think it's trying to make something that was originally supposed to be very goofy and make it into something that's uncovering mysteries and things like that. And, I haven't finished it, so I should probably give it a little bit more credit, but a third of this book is retelling the movie. And the frustration of that is like, this is a sequel. You don't need to do that with a sequel. You just need to give like a little bit of a backstory and go on with that. There are some cool elements to it. There's a little bit of the Salem stuff is kind of interesting, if not, problematic with some aspects concerning the Salem witch trials. There is, in the modern day era, there's a cool relationship between people of color and queer and of queer identity. So that's really neat. But I think it's trying to juggle a little bit too much, and it's trying to retell things that really should only be done in a movie. Like, I don't want to have somebody discuss Bette Midler singing and try to like do it verbatim in a book. You listen to Bette Midler singing by hearing her sing. So, but then again, I don't know if it was designed for me. I took a risk. And I don't hate it. It's just kind of, I just don't think it's for me. And apparently they're making an actual sequel this autumn, and apparently it has nothing to do with this book. So if you read it, at least there's no spoilers. So yeah, that's all I got. Anyway, I'm done, and thank you so much. And I am going to hand it over to my colleague, Louise, I believe. There we go.
Thank you, Greg. That ROBOPOCALYPSE sounds really cool, actually. I think I want to read that. Okay. Let's see here. Okay. The first title I have is actually the title that we'll be reading in the Wednesday night book group this month. And as Liz said, we will be meeting live. And I actually just picked this book up, started reading it, and could not put it down. I could not until the end. It had me from the first page. It's a very well-written novel. Hannah Halperin is the author of Something Wild, and this is the winner of the 2021 Edward Lewis Wallant Award and the finalist for the 2021 National Jewish Book Award for debut fiction, and longlisted for the VCU Cabell First Novelist Award. So a lot of awards for one book. And just to say, this book deals with domestic violence, which is a difficult subject. She deals really beautifully with the characters in the book, and Hannah Halperin has worked as a domestic violence counselor in real life. The book takes place mostly in Arlington, Massachusetts, so there's some local interest there, and interestingly deals with kind of the gentrification of Arlington, because the mother in this book, Lorraine Bloom, grew up in Arlington, kind of in a working class family, and marries a very successful lawyer named Jonathan, and they have two beautiful daughters, Nessa and Tanya, but there is a divorce that happens where Jonathan meets a new woman, leaves the marriage. So the girls, grow up in a broken home, and Jonathan ends up with a very kind of upper class woman who has a lot of family money, and who her family has a house in Martha's Vineyard, and she herself is a lawyer, went to Harvard Law School. So their mother gets a boyfriend as well, who is not upper class, and who it turns out is domestically violent. And the girls don't know this until later. And also, while their mother is dating, they're often left to their own devices. And so their upbringing is a bit difficult. And you see in the book sort of the gentrification of Arlington, and you see some of the kind of the difficulties of growing up in a divorced family, and also you get to witness a couple with domestic violence and some of the difficulties that they go through. I don't want to say too much. I don't want to give any spoilers, but it's a beautifully written book, really worth reading. And my next title is True Biz by Sarah Novick. Apologies to the author. I'm not sure. I think it's Novick. True Biz is an ASL expression meaning seriously or real talk. Like I'm being real with you right now. And this book focuses on three characters: Charlie, who's a 16-year-old who is deaf, and at the age of 2 was given cochlear implants, and her cochlear implants do not work very well. And her mother, wants to mainstream her and wanted her in a quote normal class. And so doesn't allow Charlie to learn American Sign Language, which is a definite deficit in Charlie's life. And apparently the author had heard about a company named Advanced Bionics, who they make cochlear implants, but they had made a bunch of faulty ones. Some of them leaked, some of them were causing people electrical shocks, convulsions, vomiting. There were some defects in about 50% of the cochlear implants. So this is something I never knew about. And we've got Charlie with a difficult situation. Luckily, she ends up going to a school for the deaf, the River Valley School for the Deaf, which is in Ohio, outside of Cincinnati. And this is very beneficial for her, even though she's behind on American Sign Language. She starts learning and getting some community. One of the people she gets to know is Austin, who grew up in a 5th generation deaf family. So he comes from a tradition of deaf family. One difficult thing that happens to him is he gets a baby sister named Skylar, who's actually born hearing. And this is difficult for the family because they've sort of taken pride in their identity as a deaf family. And the third character that we meet is February, who's the head mistress of the school. February's mother is deaf, but she herself can hear, and she really tries to nurture the students at the school. And in the meantime, her mother's got Alzheimer's, and she has to make some difficult decisions about what to do with her mother. And she has to make some difficult feelings about the school, because as often happens, there are some real budget difficulties, and it's not clear if she'll be able to save the school or not. The author also puts in like in each chapter, pages with ASL sign language and some of the symbols and what they mean. And it's such a wonderful insight into the deaf community and the realities that they face. It actually reminds me a little bit of a book we read in the Initiating Inspiration book club, which was Being Human by Judith Heumann, where she talked about, people with disabilities and the Americans with Disabilities Act and some of what people had to go through before there was some legislation to help them and to recognize, what's good for them. And fabulous, fabulous book. Can't recommend it enough. And now I want to hand it over to my esteemed colleague, Liz.
All right. Hello, everyone. Also, I just realized I thought my audio was muted, like my mic was muted, but I apparently unmuted it. So I am so sorry if any weird noises came through on there. Okay, great. So I am going to share my screen. It's going to be a party. I'm going to struggle with it like I do every time. Okay, so I have 3 titles for you today. The first one is The Fisherman by John Langan. So this cosmic horror novel has been on my radar for a while, and I finally listened to it on audio via Hoopla, which you can access with your library card. I don't want to give too much of the book away, but horror fans will not be disappointed. It's part Stephen King's Pet Sematary, part H.P. Lovecraft's The Case of Charles Dexter Ward, and part Moby Dick, kind of. The story follows Abe and Dan, 2 widowers who take up fishing to help pass the time after the deaths of their wives and, in Dan's case, children. They stumble upon this little stretch of water in the Hudson Valley in New York called Dutchman's Creek that has a very, very dark history. And the rest is something that you just need to read. It's 100% a must read for horror fans and for fishing fans. And it won several awards. I believe it won the Bram Stoker Award when it came out. So highly, highly, highly recommended. Very much enjoyed it. My next book is a pretty controversial book that came out earlier this year. It is Manhunt by Gretchen Felker Martin. I loved this book, but this post-apocalyptic novel is not for the faint of heart. Many, many content warnings for this, including torture, sexual assault, rape, transphobia, violence. A lot of really horrific things happen in this book, but I highly recommend this book. So this book picks up a few years after a devastating plague has caused almost all people with a Y chromosome to become horrific, violent, and feral monsters, unless they have a constant supply of estrogen or other testosterone lowering chemical. So our main characters are Beth and Fran. They are two trans women with very different backgrounds who have teamed up together to survive not only these feral zombie men, but also an increasingly aggressive and growing network of militant TERFs. For those who don't know what TERF, T-E-R-F means, it's trans exclusionary radical feminists. The TERFs, they view the trans women, even though they are women, as potential disease vectors because they have a Y chromosome and their bodies may produce testosterone depending on where they are in their transition. This book is super, super violent, but it is so well written. And like, if you have a weak stomach, do not read this book because it is some super like, oh God, that sounds so painful moments. But I think it's important to read it for a couple of reasons if you're a horror fan. The author is a trans woman. Gretchen is a trans woman, and there's not a lot of horror novels by non-cis individuals that make it to the large like mainstream horror writing conversation. So that's great. I think it is I had them all listed down. Oh yeah, my first one was it's well written. It's really well written. It's a very good novel. It's very scary. The second was the author is a trans woman and there needs to be more representation by non-cis folks in horror writing, in my personal opinion. And third is that it really beautifully but also horrifically illustrates that sort of the trans experience is not a monolith. Like, they're within the trans community, there are multiple subcultures, and that even though we don't live in the world of Fran and Beth, trans individuals are still fighting for their lives every single day, particularly trans women of color. So 10 out of 10 recommendation for this book. All the books I'm going to talk about today, I give 10 out of 10. Just spoilers, I loved everything. And my last book for today, total shift in tone. It's Giovanni's Room by the incomparable James Baldwin. It is a classic. This novel follows David, an American man who's living in Paris in the 1950s. The timeline sort of jumps around a bit, but it's all following David. So just sort of the short version, just because I want to get to discussion about what we've been watching on TV and whatnot. After his girlfriend, Hella, goes to Spain for an extended period, David meets Giovanni, a young Italian man, at a Parisian gay bar. David and Giovanni develop a passionate, life-changing relationship that alters the course of their lives and the lives of the people around them. Much of the story is spent in Giovanni's titular room. It's Giovanni's room, and it is sort of like a very small and disorganized little space that, in my opinion, if I can just sound like an intellectual for a moment, represents how our inner turmoil, aka Giovanni's room, is so often hidden by our romanticized exteriors, aka Paris, City of Lights in this case. So eventually Hella returns from Spain. David and Giovanni go their separate ways and nobody ends up happy. My favorite kind of book that doesn't have monsters in it. So this is definitely not a feel-good novel, but it is beautifully written. It is a classic. I highly recommend it if you want to read any of James Baldwin's works. It's a really beautiful novel. And on that note, I am going to open it up to discussion on what is happening. And sorry there, Greg, I kind of left you in the waiting room for a minute. Hey, okay. So those are my books. And Greg, did you have something on streaming media that you wanted to discuss?
I did actually, and sorry about me jumping out there. Wi-Fi was weird, but yeah. So also, I'm like scared but intrigued to read Manhunt. That sounds really awesome, but it also sounds horrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is, I'm a glutton for punishment, though, so we'll see. Maybe when I'm braver. But yeah, there is something I want to talk about, but I have to be a little bit careful about it because it's kind of in the middle of a season. So I have been watching Stranger Things, namely Volume 4 that recently came out, and I'm looking forward to watching Part 2. But just to give like a little summary of Stranger Things, it's a show that's on Netflix. It's one of the most famous shows, and it takes place in the 1980s, focusing on like a group of kids. And these kids are like, they're a little bit of social outcasts. They're Dungeons and Dragons nerds, but they have a very close friendship, and they have like, and they're great kids, and they're hanging around. And then one night, after a very successful game of D&D, their friend Will goes missing. And the whole thing about them is trying to uncover like what happened with Will, what's going on. And while they're not able to find him at first in the beginning, they do come across like a young girl who is just kind of wandering around in like medical scrubs, and she doesn't have a name. All she has is like a tattoo on her wrist that says 11. So it becomes, as they descend further and further into the mystery, it becomes clear to them that Will actually might be alive, something supernatural might be occurring, and the government might be in on it. And if that's anything, so the best way I can describe it is like if Steven Spielberg directed a script written by Stephen King and the cast of The Goonies was in it. So if you love all that 80s stuff, you're going to love this. If you don't, you probably shouldn't watch it. But it also has a good progression of narrative and storyline. Continuing after season 1, it delves into the after effects of what happened with that and is progressing. Some seasons are better than others. Season 1 was my favorite. Season 2 was still good. Season 3 was okay. Season 4, I feel like, is one of their best seasons yet. It's only season 1 surpasses by only just so much. And depending on what happens on volume 2, it might even surpass that. It's a lot darker than the other ones, because characters who started out as like 10-year-olds are now like high schoolers, and something dark is going on. The only thing I'm going to say is that it is the 4th season is influenced a lot by A Nightmare on Elm Street. Also Robert Englund makes a guest appearance. So if you love all of that, you're going to love this. But yeah, I don't want to say anything else, but if you like things that go bump in the night, that plague small towns with dark mysteries, but you also have kids who, are loyal to each other and are willing to go up against these things with a sense of humor, Stranger Things is your game. I'm looking forward to more of it, and I love the monsters so much. They're so cool. But yeah, that's what I got. So thank you.
Nice. Thank you, Greg. It's definitely on my watch list. I just have not had time. So I have one thing that I would like to talk about. Also horror. I know Greg and I tend to, veer heavy on the horror and science fiction. So for our next month, I'm going to try to get some other folks in who will have other genres that they're interested in, so that Louise doesn't have to carry all the genre diversity. So there is a streaming service called Shudder, which we have on Roku's that you can check out with your card. And a movie just got released on there called Mad God. It is mostly stop motion animation, but with a little bit of live action. And it is so bizarre. I couldn't actually tell you what it's about. Like, as we were watching it, I was like, oh, this is an allegory for the Holocaust. And then I was like, no, this is an allegory for capitalism. And I was like, oh, this is an allegory for the introduction of the Australian cane toad into Australian sugarcane plantations in the 1930s. And then I was just like, this is an allegory for something that I don't even know. It's like very confusing, visually very well done, very gory. Again, I'm on like a gore kick, which is weird. Not for me, but just for a person in general, I think. but it is so meticulous, and it took the director like 30 years to make it. He started working on it around the time RoboCop came out, I believe, and then has just been like working on it piece by piece by piece for the last 30 years. And you can tell just how meticulous he was with creating all of the pieces and the characters and the textures. It's just really, really well done. Definitely, if you want a very clear plot, don't watch this movie. Don't just watch it. Watch Stranger Things. It's also really good and has a plot. Yeah, Mad God, if you like stop motion animation, weird horror stuff, sort of outsider film and outsider cinema, then this might be a good choice for you. And you can access it by checking out one of those Rokus that we have, which have a Shudder subscription on them. Oh, so does anyone have anything else they'd like to bring up or talk about? Louise, Gray? Good?
I'm good.
All right. In that case, thank you both so much. Thanks to everyone for watching us as usual, because you are the best and we wouldn't be able to do this without you. So we will see you next month. And in the meantime, enjoy the summer weather and have a great holiday weekend, everyone. All right. Awkward Zoom wave, everybody. Bye-bye.